Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's Crush It in Sales podcast. My name is Melinda Van Fleet, and I'm a sales, strategy, and success coach for businesswomen. And I am super grateful that you joined me today. Today, I want to chat about zone of genius. And some people may be scratching their heads, and maybe that's why you're listening to this podcast, because you're curious. What the heck is a zone of genius? Yes, it is something that is being used in marketing right now in the coaching industry, especially on Facebook, a lot. I see it a lot. A lot of coaches are promising super high sales results by helping you tap into your zone of genius. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. So that's not the point of this podcast. My point of this podcast is to just share with you some thoughts about zone of genius, what it is, some examples, and maybe how you can just take that right away to the bank yourself and not feel left out and have a little bit of FOMO by following someone or listening to lots of Facebook Lives that you really don't need. When you have all the information inside of you, you just need to tap into it yourself. And working with a coach can definitely help you if you are stuck. However, you may not need that. This podcast may be just a great little tweak for you, and you may be set on your way. Or you may get some confirmation listening to this podcast, some validation, which is one of my favorite things, is when I get validation on my thought processes, and that can set you on your way. So this podcast is about discovering your zone of genius, some examples, and what the heck is a zone of genius. So your zone of genius is really what your inner being, your higher self, your true passion is and is all about. We all have things that we like and dislike, right? And we all have things that we feel a certain way about, right? So think about that as we take this little walk. So I'm going to use my husband, Ryan, as a really awesome example because he knew what his zone of genius was, and we built a business around that. A very successful business. Hence why I put it in the Crush It in Sales podcast versus the Good Karma Success Coach podcast, because it does relate back to business, and then my example will relate to sales. So often we know, and I'm using the word know as like you're knowing, our zone of genius as we're children, right? Because as you're a child and you're not tied into the constructs of society or having to find a job for money, because obviously for the most part your parents take care of you, you're living your joy. You're living and doing what makes you happy. So my husband would go fishing all the time as a child. He tells stories about taking his white bucket and his fishing pole and walking down the street to the local pond and sitting there by himself all day on the weekends, summer breaks, evenings, and his parents having to come out and look for him holding their flashlights because it was dark and he needed to come home, right? That brought him joy. Fishing has always brought him joy, and he's always been really good at it. So the two aspects, the joy and being good at it, just go hand in hand. They work like in synergy. They have an energy around them. It makes him happy. He does well. He wants to improve. It's just like this ongoing momentum that has been with him since he was a child. So when we met and he said to me, I'm not joking when I tell you guys this, I don't know if I'll love anything more than fishing. And I saw that in him, and me as an intuitive understood this whole concept, even though the internet really wasn't what it is. I got it. I understood it. I could see it. He wanted to go fishing all the time. We went to lakes and streams. On vacation, we went fishing. We always went fishing. And he was really, really good. So his innate passion that stemmed from himself is what he ended up deriving a business from. Versus someone who comes down to the Keys, sees that it's the sport fishing capital of the world, watches people's Instagrams and Facebooks and sees that there's a lot of successful captains down here, right? And tries to copy a business model that they aren't truly innately passionate about and have the talent. See, they both still work hand in hand. He has the talent and he has the passion. So they're operating against their zone of genius to try to make money. And often that doesn't work. You're not going to reach your optimal success by copying someone else's business model that was created from their zone of genius, from their higher self within them. You can't copy that. You can't. So that's why understanding your zone of genius and relating that back to your business or sales is really, really, really important. So you're in alignment. You can be happy. You can be at peace. Things can flow. You don't feel like you're hustling, right? Or working so hard, which is another thing that's going around, on the internet. Don't hustle. Don't work so hard. Take it easy. Well, there's a lot packed in that. But one of the aspects is when you're truly doing what you love, you don't have those feelings because you're happy. You're happy. You're doing what you love, right? So often in sales, because sales is just such a crucial element to a successful business. But sometimes as a business owner, you may not be passionate about selling, right? So you may be passionate about your product because you created it, you love it, it's your baby, but you may not be passionate about selling because selling may not be your zone of genius, right? So then you would hire out. You would hire out a sales team, sales consultant, sales coach, someone to help you make all of that magic work easier, more profitable, more abundant. So for me, my zone of genius has always been building businesses. I have known that forever. When I was a buyer, I always knew that. I love it. I love to build. I'm a builder. And I believe I've talked about that briefly in a podcast before. So for me, creating content is building, sales is building, coaching people is building. All these things go into building, right? So when you come in alignment with your zone of genius, it all just flows naturally and it's not hard. It's not hard work. It's easy. It's fun. It's fun to have a conversation, a client call, right? Because you end up having this conversation. You're like, oh, that was really easy and fun. And then you realize you gave them like 10 ideas that just kind of came to you naturally based on your experience and your zone of genius, right? See how it ties together? But if you're not operating in that way, that's when you have to do a deep dive and go, okay, let's sit down. Let's take some time. Let's take some awareness and see where I can tweak and pivot so I am operating from a zone of genius. So a great example of perhaps someone that isn't into sales, right, is our fabulous dog groomers, Maria and Dennis. I would die without them. I love them so much. And I totally respect how amazing they are with our 3 dogs, because our 3 dogs are a handful. If you know me, you know. They're a handful. And they are so fantastic with them. Oh my gosh. But Maria has said to me a million times, she hates social media. She does not like selling. She does not like anything about that. She just, no social media, no selling, not her zone of genius. Her zone of genius is working with animals and being a great dog groomer too, she also has to work good with the owners. So she's good with both people and with owners, right? So she and her husband are operating in their zone of genius, and she's been wise enough to stay away from social media. And her sales ends up becoming referrals. That's how she ends up selling, is people refer. And she can build her business that way. But she's operating in her zone of genius. So often, and I'm going to circle this to the Good Karma Success Coach podcast that I just released on Sunday. So I believe it's episode 170. The whole, if I can do it, you can do it thing may not really apply if you're thinking about your zone of genius. So if you're thinking you're someone that can be a coach, but you really can't stand working with people, it's probably not your zone of genius. Newsflash, right? Right? So think about that. I do believe this is why a lot of people are stuck, especially coaches, because online we're trying to do what these other people who have made $1 million in 50 minutes have done, right? But they may be operating in their zone of genius, which is probably different from your zone of genius. So that's the challenge. You have to stop comparing yourself, and you have to work through those triggers, and then you have to figure out what is your zone of genius? What makes you special? What makes you happy? What are you good at? What are you natural at? And go from there. And pivot and tweak if you need to. For some people, it's super easy. For some people, this may be more difficult. So don't feel bad. Don't be embarrassed. Don't be ashamed. Just think about these things. We're heading into a new year. If you happen to be listening to this in 2021, it's the end of the year. We're heading into a new year. I believe in always pivoting and tweaking and not worrying about the new year. However, that's not how the world works. We all get very focused on the new year. It's like in our brains, in our left brain, it's this like, starting point, right? So I'm going to just go with that. It's a starting point for you to go, okay, have I been stuck? What hasn't been working? Do I really like it? Is it my zone of genius? Or am I trying to create a charter boat business in the Florida Keys and I freaking hate fishing? What am I doing? I hate it. Hate the smell of fish. Hate all the overhead. Hate the weather. Hate all the things. I only eat tofu. So why would you try to operate in someone else's zone of genius? Your higher self has a different vision for you, and you have to tap into that. You have to tap into that. So I'm going to leave it at that today. If you need help on this, I can help you. I totally get it. I get it from a personal perspective. I get it from a business perspective. I get it from a sales perspective. I get it from understanding your spouse or partner. So please reach out to me, Melinda at melindavanfleet.com. If you're not already following me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Pinterest, YouTube, Instagram, follow me. I'm always sharing fun stuff that can help you transform. Until next week, I hope you crush it in sales. Thanks for listening.